Hello, my lovelies, and thank you again for listening to Listen Closely. I am your host, Bobby, and today's episode is going to be different. First and foremost, obviously, I am by myself. John had some running around to do, and if you don't know, we are both very active in our community. Him way more than me, so he is currently running around trying to get things ready within our community for an event. He will not be with me for this episode, so you'll just have to listen to me for this one. Not to worry though, he will be back next week for a new topic that we will cover. Another thing that's different is, if you cannot tell, I'm talking very, very softly and very low, or more low than what I normally talk. And that is because I'm actually sick. I am battling a ear infection as well as I believe some allergies. So please bear with me with this episode. I did want to record an episode this week, even through my sickness, because I felt this was one that when I saw it and I read about it, it had to be talked about. This is an active case, and there's not very much to it because of it being an active case. There's not much that they can currently give out on this case. And this case also does involve sexual assault. So if it's something that you are uncomfortable with hearing about, by all means, I do not blame you. It was one, again, when I read it, I was like, I don't really want to talk about sexual assault because it's something that should never happen, but it's something that needs to be talked about more because these victims need their justice. And by talking out and, speaking out against it, you can help solve or stop another victim from having to deal with this. So this case is actually very, very recent. On May 4th, 2021, the San Jacinto County Sheriff's Office and the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office here in Texas conducted a joint investigation into allegations of sexual assault made by several victims describing similar incidences. During the investigation, it was learned that the suspect, a Mr. David Lynn Turner, 46 of Houston, targeted several of his victims through various social media platforms and dating apps. So what that means is he would go on the various social medias, whether that be Facebook, Instagram, and all the other ones. I'm not sure which ones they were, along with dating apps. Again, there could be plenty of fish. There's that Tinder, I believe. I'm not too sure. I am a married woman. I did use some of these apps at one point, but I completely forgot about them. But the different social media platforms and dating apps which people tend to gravitate towards as far as for dating purposes. So he would use these apps and social media platforms, and he would lure victims in. So it is alleged that Turner drove these women to remote locations in San Jacinto County and surrounding counties under the pretenses of going ghost hunting. And there he would then sexually force himself upon these women in various ways. So what he was doing was he was, basically saying, hey, let's go ghost hunting. And then he would take these victims to different locations, obviously remote, where no one could see them or probably hear them. And then he would force himself on these women. Turner is very familiar with the law enforcement. He had worked for over 2 years as a reserve Texas peace officer in Harris County between 2012 and 2015. So as a result of this joint investigation, Turner was arrested on May 4th, 2021, which is this year, and charged with 2 counts of sexual assault and is currently in the San Jacinto County Jail with a $500,000 bond. Now, obviously, this is July, and as far as I can tell, he has not made bond yet, so he is still sitting in the county jail. Could find nothing on whether or not he has made bond or not, so he should still be sitting there. It is believed that Turner's activities began as early as December of 2018. So that was 3 years ago. They believe that it's when it started in the greater Southeast Texas region, with potential victims from Beaumont, Galveston, Katy, the Woodlands, Cold Spring, and Livingston, Texas. The San Jacinto County and Montgomery County detectives are still actively investigating this matter and seeking contact with possible additional victims. And anyone with information or interactions associated with David Lynn Turner or similar incidences are encouraged to contact detectives with either the San Jacinto County Sheriff's Office at 653-4367, or the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office at 936-760-5800. And to remain completely anonymous, you can also call the Multi-County Crime Stoppers at 1-800-392-STOP or 1-800-392-7867. So again, this is a very active case, and I do want to encourage anyone with any kind of information to call these numbers. This one really hit hard for me. One, because me and my husband just recently got into this, ghost hunting and actually, going to places where these events took place. And I just can't imagine, as a single woman being lured under these false pretenses of going ghost hunting and, thinking that you're going out looking for something else when in fact, you end up becoming a victim of a horrible sexual assault crime. And, that's just one thing I do want to make mention is if you or someone you know has been a victim of sexual assault, please come forth, talk about it, tell someone, tell anyone. I know it's one of those really uncomfortable conversations that you don't really want to have, but it is very necessary to talk about it. You could prevent someone else from getting sexually assaulted, and you can get a little bit of justice. You can get a little bit of your power back. I know growing up, we watched Unsolved Mysteries and Cold Case and, different things of that nature. And so many of these cases were just, the lack of DNA evidence, or it was more hearsay where, the predator goes free because, the victim would go home after, the assault and then just wash off, and take their clothes off and wash them because they just want to get that feeling off of them. They're trying to cleanse themselves. And that's one thing my mom always taught me was, if this were to ever happen, obviously she did not want this to ever happen to me. But she said if it were to ever happen, do not wash, do not take your clothes off, do not do anything that may, damage that DNA evidence on you. You are to go to somewhere safe, whether that be, the police station, whether that be a hospital, whether that be your friend's house. You go somewhere and you tell somebody. And from there, they can alert the authorities if you went to your friend's house or whatever, or, something can be done. Because, again, most of these cases, they're just really sad because they're not solved because the lack of DNA evidence or the lack of testing. There was a lot of backlog in a lot of these into where we talked about, the murder of Mary Catherine Edwards, where, the DNA was there. It's just that, the killer was not in the system at the time. That should never stop you from coming out and saying something. Just because they may not figure it out now doesn't mean they won't figure it out later on. And again, you need to be able to tell somebody. And I just want to real quickly talk about the statute of limitations for sexual assaults. For those that don't know, the statute of limitations is the amount of time the state has to file a complaint for an alleged criminal offense. If they do not prosecute before the deadline, the case could be dismissed. Under the new Texas law that happened in 2019, the statute of limitations has been lifted for cases in which a person claimed to have been sexually assaulted and was subject to a DNA exam that was never tested. So that's the ones that you kind of hear about, they had, the DNA on a piece of clothing or they got it from the victim, but then they actually never tested it. And that's where you hear about, they stored it away in a box and was forgotten about for X amount of years. The statute of limitations now has been lifted from that, so there is no limit from where you can prosecute that person. The prosecutor can pursue that case until the kit is actually analyzed. And the time limit halt also applies to situations where the forensic analysis was completed, but the DNA did not match the victim or any other person. For all other sexual assault cases, the statute of limitations has been increased to 10 years. So, like with this case, they believe that Turner's activities began as early as December of 2018. So we are still within the statute of limitations to prosecute. Again, if you or anyone you know has had something happen to them, whether it be from Mr. Turner or from someone else, please, I am begging for you to go out and tell somebody. I mean, the DNA might not be there anymore, But just you telling something, you might say something that might help another case and, bring it closer to finding justice. So just because it may have happened a couple years ago, like in 2018, 2019, doesn't mean it doesn't matter. It matters. Like I said with this one, they are looking for anyone who's had any kind of information or interactions associated with David Lynn Turner or similar incidences. And you're encouraged to call these different sheriff's offices. And I want to say these sheriff's offices numbers again because it's so important. And I will actually post this Crime Stoppers press release on my Facebook and Instagram because it's something that needs to be showed. It needs to be shared and reshared because these victims need their justice. You can contact the detectives with either San Jacinto County Sheriff's Office at 936-653-4367 or the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office at 936-760-5800. And again, to remain completely anonymous, you can also call the Multi-County Crime Stoppers at 1-800-392-STOP or 1-800-392-7867. And I mean, I just cannot stress it enough for anyone and everyone to say something. That's what I really want you to take away from this episode. It wasn't a very long one. Again, I am doing it by myself because my husband is off doing community work, which, bravo to him. But also, it was just one that I felt I needed to do by myself. I needed to cover this one because although it is an uncomfortable subject and a subject that honestly, it should never happen. Sexual assault should never happen. But unfortunately, we cannot control the demons in someone else. And when it does happen, again, say something. Tell someone. Do something. That's all I really want. If you can't get anything else out of this episode, is just do something. I mean, it could help you, it could help another case, and it could help potential future victim. Again, I do want to apologize for how I sound. This was a really rough one to record, and one that, editing me is going to have a very hard time with because I was coughing and sneezing throughout this whole episode. But again, I thought it was definitely, this week should not have been skipped, even though I might be feeling, not the best, under the weather. It was very important to me when I accidentally stumbled upon this case, which is what I happen to do a lot. I just happen to be researching something or, typing something in Google, and I'll just put, very basic words, and somehow these things pop up. And that's how I found this one. And in my area, which we are actually about 1.5 to 2 hours away from Houston, I had not heard about this one. And, after doing my research on this case, our area did not cover this. And if you don't remember, I said that he had potential victims in the Beaumont, Galveston, Katy, Woodlands, Cold Spring, and Livingston, Texas areas. So that is my area. I don't know why we chose not to cover this. From what I could tell, it was only the Houston, San Jacinto, Woodlands, area that covered this. I'm not too sure why, but it is definitely one that needs to be covered in this area. But that'll do it for this episode. And if you could do one thing other than report any kind of sexual assaults or any kind of crimes, honestly, that happens, I always ask that you listen closely.